Okay, let's begin. Welcome everybody. Let me see if I have any words left. so, uh, welcome everybody to Parsha Mishpatim 5782. It is a parsha of, as the name implies, laws. Obviously connected to Har Sinai with the very first words, the famous first Rashi in the parsha, Ve'elu HaMishpatim, and these are the laws. Right after the Ten Commandments implies that these two, just like the Ten Commandments, were given at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, and have all of the pomp and circumstance and all of the spiritual energy and everything, all the good things you can imagine about the Ten Commandments that there's so many movies made about. The same is true about these laws that nobody has made a movie about yet, right? So obviously there are a lot of laws, and the very, very end of the parsha deals with the conclusion of not the entire conclusion, but the rest of the Har Sinai story of receiving the Ten Commandments, the famously Nasa v'Nishma, as we'll see, is in this week's parsha. It's a pet peeve of mine that people mention it always in Divrei Torah about last week's parsha. The Jews said Nasa v'Nishma. Yeah, they said Nasa v'Nishma, but they said it in this week's parsha, also regarding Har Sinai, but nevertheless. It is specific to this week's parsha. That's weird. Okay, let's see if I can do that. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay, I've muted all of you, by the way. In case you want to unmute, I think you can click your space bar to speak. Unless you're watching this on YouTube, in which case you can say anything you want. I won't hear you. Unless you type in the comments. So right now we'll share the screen and the source sheet that I shared with you by email. If you have not received the email, let me know. And that's not the right parsha. Silly. All right, let's try this again. That was last week's parsha. Silly. There we go. Ta-da. Brilliant. All right. Baruch Hashem. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Let's see where we're going with this. Let's see. And these are the laws that you shall set before them. So this is Moshe being told by Hashem to teach the Jewish people these laws and to teach it to them in a set way, like a set table, very organized, very clear, and in a way that that everybody here can easily understand. So our first comment today is going to come from Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch, in the new red translation of Rav Hirsch's German commentary on the Torah, the commentary Mishpatim takes up about 150 pages, give or take. So it's intense, but we're going to look at a famous Rashi, as mentioned before. It says Kol hamakom shenemar Eila pasal et harishonim. Anytime where it says Eila, these implies these and no others. It eradicates any earlier mention, right? If I say, if I mention a bunch of, I don't know, albums, and I say, these are my favorite, and then I start listing new albums of some sort, right? So what does that imply about the ones I mentioned earlier? They're not included in this category. Right? They're not my favorite albums. Okay, so that's logic, right? These, only these. So if it would have said Eile Mishpatim, these are the laws, it would sort of say these are the laws and no others. No, the previous laws, the 10 Commandments, there's something different. That was just advice. These are the laws, or something like that. But by having that little letter, that little vav, that little hook that attaches one thing to another, says ve'ele, and these, says Rashi, Mosef al harishonim. That implies that it is included in the earlier category. So if I was listing off albums, this album, that album, and then I say, and these are my favorite albums. Why am I saying and? Because I'm implying that these also. So the previous albums are included. So the same thing, Ma Rishonim Sinai, just like the earlier verses, in other words, the Ten Commandments are from Har Sinai. Af Elu Sinai, these two are from Har Sinai. And this is Rashi quoting from the Talmud, not from the Talmud, from the Midrash in the Mechilta. Okay. We're going to skip the Gur Arya for today. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll skip it for today. Maybe we'll get back to what is going on here. Hold on 1 second. I realize now what I did. Give me 1 second, please. Let's stop sharing. I apologize. That was the wrong year. That explains why that happened. Let's go. I'm sorry. Give me 1 moment. This is what happens when you're in a hurry. Okay. Sorry. Oh, gosh. Okay. There we are. Okay. All right. That explains a lot. So, so why is it that this follows after the Ten Commandments? So Rav Hirsch on the verse, the very first mishpat of all the mishpatim, of all the laws, are laws about a Hebrew slave, a Jewish slave. What's a Jewish slave? So it's somebody who stole something, and he doesn't become a slave because he stole something. If he wanted to earlier, under any other circumstance, he must to give back what he stole and pay a fine or pay off the cost of whatever it is that he stole. He does not become a slave. Slavery is not a punishment. Slavery is a way to fix the mistake that happened by him stealing something, because at this point, he has not really respected somebody else's property. So here he is, he's a slave, and all of the laws about being nice, about taking care of people, about helping people out, about helping out animals, all of the laws, the pilgrimage festivals, everything all of the laws that are going to be in Mishpatim, all start with this, the Jewish slave. Now, is that appropriate? Does that make sense? Why would we start with this of all things? So that's really Rav Hirsch's comment. And he starts by saying, to the unprejudiced mind, nothing could demonstrate the authenticity of the oral law as cogently as the first two subsections, verses 2-8 to 2-6 and 7-11, with which Mosaic law begins. This is to be the civil and criminal code of a nation. It is to set forth the principles and ordinances of justice and humanity that are to regulate human relationships within the framework of the state. As to be expected, the first section of the code deals with personal rights. But with what does this section begin? With laws applicable if a man sells another man and if a man sells his own daughter as a slave? Why would you start with that? So this beginning would be unthinkable, inconceivable, were the written law actually the book of laws of the Jewish people, the sole primary source of Jewish law, as certain groups of Jews were already saying in Rav Hirsch's time. What a mass of laws and legal principles must have already been stated and established, considered and clarified before the Torah could even turn to treat these cases, which surely are only exceptional cases. And yet it is precisely with these verses, which limit the most sacred of human rights and negate the right to personal freedom, that the law begins. To explain, in case it's not already very clear, obviously, if you're saying you can't steal something, that means that there's already a subtext. There is somewhere someone has discussed the idea that there's such a thing as private property. As such, sorry. making sure everybody's muted, except myself. um, so uh, obviously, there's such a thing as private property. Where is that discussed? Who said that? So obviously, there's going where our person is going to say, we're going to see it inside very soon. What he's going to say is that obviously there's an oral law. And obviously, there are things that are not written down, but have been passed on from generation to generation and through other works and other books that we need to know. So he goes, however, the primary source of Jewish law is not the written word, the book, but the living teachings of the oral tradition. The book serves only as an aid to memory and a resource when doubts arise. In other words, we do not paskin, we do not get our official halakhic opinions from Torah verses. Now, that could be shocking to some people, but that's not how we understand the Torah. The Torah isn't always taken, for example, literally. And we need to know what Chazal tell us, what the rabbis tell us through tradition to understand what it is actually saying. So he says the book itself establishes the fact that the whole Torah has already been transmitted to the people and impressed upon them and lived by them for 40 years before Moshe, just before his death, turned over to them the book of the Torah. This book that we have, this Chumash, right? This book was not given to the people at Har Sinai. It was given to them 38 years later, after 40 years, 40 years later, while they were in the desert. And so at the end, when they were about to enter Israel, that's when they get the Torah. That means that they would already know all of these laws, and these are just ways to remind them. They even know some of the intricacies and details of the law that aren't written in the book, but are hinted at, and that the Talmud has to sort of tease out of the verses. The Talmud or the Midrash. And that's where we get our halacha from, our law, or at least the basis of it. Again, we don't also, just so you know, just in case you start learning Talmud and try to figure out halacha from it, we don't also get halacha from the Talmud either. We get it from later sources. Okay, anyway, accordingly, it is the primary and exceptional cases that are recorded, for it is precisely from them that the principles of ordinary life can be derived more clearly. Right? So in other words, we need to have the extremes, the exceptions to the rule to understand the rule better so we can make honest decisions about what the halacha should be, what the law should be. So he goes on, and we're just going to skip the next paragraph. He says here, the book was not intended as a primary source of the law. It was meant for those who were already well versed in the law, as we said, to use as a means of retaining and reviving ever anew the knowledge that they had already committed to memory. Right? They already knew the Torah, right? The oral law they already knew, and this written text that they got at the end of their sojourn in the desert was just a way to remind them. It was basically if you've ever been in class and you've taken notes, obviously the notes that you're taking from a discussion aren't, unless you can write super fast, you're not going to get every single word that somebody's saying. But you'll get the main idea, and then you can look over those main ideas, and it'll remind you of the conversations. It was intended as a teaching aid for teachers of the law, as a reference to confirm the oral law, so that the students could find it easy, within the aid of the written text before them, to reproduce in their minds ever anew the knowledge they received by word of mouth. So he gives the exact same metaphor that I just mentioned, the relationship between Torah Shebektav, the written Torah, and the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah, is like that between brief written notes taken on a scientific lecture and the lecture itself. Right? The students who attended the oral lecture require only their brief notes to recall at any time the entire lecture. They often find a word, a question mark, an exclamation mark, a period, or the underscoring of a word is sufficient to bring to mind a whole series of ideas, observations, and qualifications, and so forth. So that's basically what the point of the Torah is for, these mishpatim. It's not for us to get law from, but for reminders of the oral law, which is so much more important and is the basis of our actual halacha, our actual decided way of behaving. That being the case, then it needed to start with this so that we'd get the principles, the actual categories very clear. And especially he goes on to say, when it comes to property and when it comes to our freedoms as a human being. God's law, the Torah, wants to instill in us the principles of justice and humanity, on the basis of which it commands us to respect human rights. It starts off with the criminal, specifically one who takes the property of his fellow man, a crime that in all other states is punished by severe corporal punishment and imprisonment. Let us see what is done with such a criminal according to God's law and in his state. He goes on to say the criminal isn't in prison, because prison is not a solution. If there's a prison sentence at all, it's just a time to keep this person sort of under wraps, so that we can now investigate the crime and see what decision will come of it. It's not to punish the person, or definitely not to house this person indefinitely, for like no years and years, and see what the result will be. Most times in most prison situations, it doesn't usually end up as well as you might imagine. They learn, for example, very often a prisoner going in for a crime, for one kind of crime, might have a roommate, right, a cellmate, from whom he learns other tricks, other crimes, and then goes out and commits them after he's out of prison. People who go to prison and are released very often end up back in prison. Very often, too often. It's not a reform system, and it's certainly not one that works anywhere near 100% of the time. Okay, so Rav Hirsch talks about that as well later on in his commentary. You can look at that on your own. Right now, though, let's skip a few more verses to this situation. So this slave is supposed to be a slave for 6 years. In the Yovel year, in the 7th year, we're going to learn about Yovel and other parshiot. In the year of Jubilee, in the 7th year, everything goes back to their original owners, and the slave who has sold himself into slavery to pay off a debt that he stole. So that person now goes free, right? Absolutely free. No punishment, no rumors, nothing bad happens to him. So right, so in the case that a slave wants to stay, he likes it for whatever reason. He likes where he lives. He's a slave, and I don't know, in a mansion in somewhere right on top of Del Cerro. He's perfectly happy there. He likes his job. He likes his owner. He has a nice, comfortable bed. By the way, the slave is supposed to get the most comfortable bed, most comfortable sheets and pillows. Right? He's comfortable. He likes it. His wife is there. She likes it. While he's working, she's sunbathing outside by the pool. Everybody's having a great time. It's a vacation almost. So let's say he wants to stay now, and in the Yovel year, he doesn't want to go back to San Carlos. He's happy in Del Cerro. Right, whatever, if you understand the metaphor. All right, so he's perfectly content where he's working. He doesn't want to go back. There is a way for him to be the servant, the slave of this person forever. Forever. And how is that? V'higisho, says verse 21, chapter 21, verse 6. V'higisho adonav el ha'elokim. So it should be actually not God. Should be Elohim, should be judges. V'higisho el hadelet, and he brings them to the door, o el mezuzah, or to the doorpost. V'ratza adonav et azno b'martzeh v'avdo le'olam. And then his master is supposed to basically punch a hole through his ear using an awl, and then that person becomes a slave for life. And awl, by the way, is a tool. Obviously, hopefully they're hygienic about it. They don't just use any old rusty awl. And awl is basically like a giant, sharp, kind of like a nail with a handle at the end. So you can like jab things into it and make holes. That's, for example, one way to make another belt loop if you need. All right, so that's the kind of thing an awl is usually used for. Here it's used to puncture the ear either into the door or almost next to the door or the doorpost. This is an argument in Chazal about exactly how this is done. We're not going to get into that now. But we are going to wonder, at least, why this has to be done with an all at all. Right? All right. So why are we using this particular tool? It's called a martzeya in Hebrew. Why are we using a martzeya? And it says it has no b'martzeya. It has to be a martzeya. Whether it's the door, whether it's the doorpost, we're not sure. But it's for sure one thing is for certain: it's the ear, and it's done through this tool, the all. Right. So why is that? So there are, of course, different answers to this question. Right now, we're going to look at the Bali Tosfot. So the Tosfot is usually a commentary on Rashi, the grandsons of Rashi, great-grandsons of Rashi. They also have a commentary that's at least attributed to them for the Torah called Dat Zakenim Mebali Tosfot. Sometimes it's just called Dat Zakenim, the opinions of the elders. But there are, anyway, so it says here, Lama Martzeya, why does it have to be a Martzeya? Lefi Shem Martzeya, the letters of Martzeya, which is Shin, Mem, Resh, Tzadi, Ayin. By the way, all of those are even numbers, and they all are multiples of 10. So it's 300 plus 40 plus 200 plus 90 plus 70, right? Is Gematria Arba Me'ot. It's a Gematria of 400, which is pretty easy to figure out, but wait, hold on. No, not Shin. Martzeya, which is Mem, Resh, Tzadi, Ayin. Those four letters. So that's 40 plus 200 plus 90 plus 70, which equals evenly 400. We're not talking about one close, 400 even. So Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem said, Ani hotzeti etchem, I freed you. Avod arba me'od shana, you that you would have been slaves for 400 years. Amarti ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. You are my slaves now. But this guy halach v'kana adon l'atzmo, and he's going to go and acquire another master for himself. Lefichach, therefore, yilka b'martzeya. Specifically, you're using a martzeya to teach the lesson that, by the way, Rashi points out as well why it's at the door, etc., etc. So part of the lesson, why is there a punishment at all for this person, or not? Maybe a punishment is the wrong word, but why is there some sort of a mark he has to have that he's making himself a slave forever? Let him be a slave forever. No, he's doing the wrong thing. He shouldn't want to be somebody's slave forever. Right? He should have a retirement plan that includes being free and being liberated and learning Torah and doing mitzvot and not having somebody oppress you and keep your time for himself. This servant is now going to be a slave forever. He can't go on vacation. He can't decide, oh, I'm going to learn Daf Yomi now. No, he has to do what his master tells him. If his master tells him, I want you to wash the dishes and wash the floors and wash the windows every day and fix the car and this and that, and then whenever you have free time, I want you to do this and that, you can do that. It can almost be busy work. Shouldn't be completely useless busy work. There's laws about these things, believe it or not, but that's part of servitude.
I have a question.
Yeah, I like questions.
So this is a Jewish slave with a Jewish owner?
Yes.
And there's no mitzvah for the Jewish owner to make time for the slave to learn Torah or anything like that? Like he is not obligated to give him some time off?
Nope.
Or anything like that?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Not that I know of. It would be nice, but I don't think he has to. I don't see anywhere where it says he has to do that.
So he's taking away his kind of like Olam Haba a little bit.
Well,
I mean, if he can't learn Torah, then
he didn't lose his Olam Haba. He
not lose it, but
believe it or not, even in our world, there are people who don't learn as much as they should. Doesn't mean they lost their Olam Haba. They lost some of it, maybe.
Like lesson. I meant lesson. Yeah, not lesson. Yeah, I'm down with everything. Yeah.
I didn't see anywhere where it said that I'll look into it just in case. I have not seen anywhere where it says that the owner has to provide the slave with time to learn, time to do mitzvot, time to daven with a minyan or anything like that. It's significant. All right. Next piece, we're going to skip a little bit. What I want to do next is I want to share a drasha with you from the Chidah. We were, as mentioned in the last few weeks, every once in a while I like to mention it. These are the weeks of Shovavim, which some people have sort of dedicated to sort of reviewing the laws of tzniut, of sexuality, morality, these sorts of things, and teshuva, obviously. Most of us, what I've learned from my Rebbeim and what it seems like in Chazal, there are many there's many ways that the Yetzer Hara can attack a person. Kina, taiva, and kavod. Kina, tava, and kavod. It's jealousy and sexuality, lust, and honor. Those are the things that basically run most people, as the Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avot, to take a person out of the world. So the way I've learned it from my Rebbeim is that really, of all of those, really tava is the one that really gets to people the most. And you see that. You see in the world, people get in trouble most of the time. There's people getting in trouble for financial things too, of course, but most often the thing that the people really focus on is that the fact that people get in trouble and people make mistakes in areas of sexuality. So, and this is a good time to learn about these things and to do teshuva. And on the subject of teshuva, I wanted to share this beautiful idea from the Chidah. So the pasuk tells us, 21:21, easy to remember. Ach im yom o yomayim yamod lo yakum ki chaspohu. So if somebody gets hurt, somebody gets injured, but he survives for a day or two, he is not avenged. In other words, if a person gets killed and then gets hurt and gets killed and dies right there on the spot, when they say what's it called in legal terms? I forget what it's called. Either way, it doesn't matter. When somebody dies, where do they have been hurt? So at that point, that the person who killed them, if they killed them accidentally, in Jewish law, have to run away to an ir hanidachat. We're going to learn more about that when we get to Devarim. But in this case, and he's chased, or she is chased, it could be a she, is chased by somebody called the Goel Hadam, the blood avenger. So this person is supposed to, in theory, chase this person into this Ir miklat. Thank you. This meeting is in my head. Sorry. Yeah, ir miklat. He has to run away to an ir miklat, and then therefore the blood avenger sort of pushes this killer there. In this case, where the person didn't die on the spot but died a day or two later, so there's no blood avenger. There's no lo yakum ki kaspohu. This person who got injured in this particular case, sorry, I didn't give you all the verses, but this particular case, the person who got injured was somebody's slave. So there's no vengeance, there's no anything else. He was somebody's property, right? He was a slave, and so it's a completely different level of punishment. So writes the Chomat Anoch. The Chomat Anoch, which is the Chidah, he writes, he saw in the words of Mahara Chivun, right? Mahara Yosef, so Chivun, he saw that it says that this is actually a discussion about teshuva. How is this a discussion about teshuva? So he says a beautiful thing. How do you know that you sincerely repented for your sin? How do you know that it was successful. You went and you said sorry, you hit your breast a bunch of times, whatever. You said the Slach Lanu prayer, you cried. How do you know you actually did teshuva successfully? And more importantly, even if you were sincere, let's say on Yom Kippur, you cried your eyes out, I'm sorry I did this, I'm sorry I did that, and then comes around the next day, Motzei Yom Kippur, and you're back to the old ways. So was that teshuva sincere? Or just because you had a backsliding, you fell back to your old ways, does that mean it's all for fallen? You definitely you're no good. Don't even bother doing Yom Kippur next year. So what's going on? Does this lapse cancel out the teshuva? How do you know? So this Rabbi Chivyun came up with a conclusion. He thought about it for a long time. He came up with a way to find out whether your teshuva is actual mitkabel, whether it's accepted. He says the determining factor is the person's attitude when they're actually doing about what are they thinking about their previous teshuva. In other words, when you did this bad thing again, when you reverted, when you fell back on your old ways, and you did this terrible thing, obviously your sin is sort of revived. It's given a new life, right? On the other hand, if you just because you weren't planning on this, you didn't want to do this, but you weren't thinking about it, and you just wanted to, and you were too tired to fight it, whatever your excuse is, right? So that's different. That's a different attitude. You feel bad, and you're still remembering that you had a teshuva, and that you changed your ways. In that case, he says, your teshuva stays intact, and your old sin is forgiven. And our verse hints to that. This verse hints to that. How? So he says, Ach im yom o yomayim, if for a day or two, that day refers to Yom Kippur. It's a one-day holiday. Yomayim, too, refers to Rosh Hashanah. If in those cases, if on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Ya'amod, Ach im yom o yomam Ya'amod, if you stood on those days, in other words, you survived or maintained your teshuva, but then you fell back, lo yakum, you didn't keep standing, you fell back. In that case, lo yakum, then there's no vengeance. No, you're not going to get punished for it. Why? Ki kaspohu, because he still has desires. Meaning kesef isn't only ownership, but kesef can also imply a desire for something. So he, in other words, he only sinned because he couldn't fight the urge, and not because he really wanted to, not because that's where his heart is. On the other hand, it's the other way around. He didn't want to do it at all. So at im Yom Kippur, Yomayim Rosh Hashanah, Yamod b'tshuva tefila lo yakum ein lo kiyum ki kaspohu ikar dato, his real ikar, his real desire, ba'avor hakesef sheyeh lo parnasa. His real desire is not to sin. His real desire is to do the right thing. And so if that's his attitude, then he is actually forgiven for his sins, and he has nothing to worry about. And one of the challenges that the Yetzer Hara gives us very often is, oh, you look at you, you messed up again, you messed up a third time, you messed up a fourth time. What's the point of teshuva at this point? You're a lost cause. There's no way you're going to succeed, so forget about it. No, that's not the correct attitude. That's the Yetzer Hara, as usual. As they say, the Yetzer Hara sort of dresses up as a big tzaddik. then as you're on the floor crying about the mistake you made, he kicks you in the head, right? Kicks you on the floor, tries to keep you down and not doing teshuva, which is really the essence of the whole point of this mistake that you made, is that this is supposed to help elevate you even higher. That's when the Yetzer Hara comes in again to try to stop you. And that's when you have to really buck up and fight the Yetzer Hara and say, no, I messed up, I agree, but I'm not a lost cause. I can get back on it and I can be stronger in the future. That is the hardest teshuva, but it's also the most effective when it's done. All right, let's look at a beautiful, beautiful comment from the Ketav Sofer on this very important idea. We're going to skip to verse 22, chapter 22, verse 24, 24, Chaf Bet, Chaf Daled. So here we're talking about a completely different mitzvah. We're talking about the mitzvah of lending money for people who need it. Right? There's somebody poor. Obviously, if you can give the money, you can afford to give the money, great. But you can also lend the money. You can give them a loan, and they'll pay you back, obviously without interest, etc., etc. That's what we're going to see here. See, im kesef tilve et ami, if you lend money to my people, et ha'ani imach, especially to the poor person amongst you, lo tiya lo kenosha lo tesimun alav neshech. Do not be, don't be bothering them about the money that they owe you. Don't act like, I own you now because you owe me money, for example. And obviously you can't take interest from them. You can't expect them, you lent them $500. You can't expect them to pay you back $600 or even $501 or even $500 and a penny. Interest is not allowed. And so that is what this verse is talking about. But says the Ketav Sofer, interesting question. You might have not noticed this one. It said, Im kesef tilve et ami et ha'ani imach, to the poor person amongst you. Now, this verse would have made 100% the same exact sense, you would think, pardon the pun, even without the word imach, right? If you're giving money to my nation, to the poor person, don't be a creditor and don't take interest. Why does it have to be the poor person among you? So writes the Ketav Sofer. He says, nearly hinektiv, it says in Tehillim, Kuvav Pasuk Gimel. It says in Tehillim, fortunate are those who keep justice and do the right thing at all times. Actually, Shomrei Mishpat Osetzedaka B'chol 8. He says, this verse in Tehillim is trying to tell us something. Look at that. It said in that verse in Tehillim, Ashrei Shomrei Mishpat Oseh Tzedakah. Oseh is singular. One person doing tzedakah. B'chol 8. But previously it said Ashrei Shomrei Mishpat. Shomrei is plural. The guardians of justice. Right? Guardians of justice, one person, Oseh tzedakah, does tzedakah. What's happening here? Tzarech lahavin. One moment. We don't need that. Tzarech lahavin. Lama k'tiv Oseh tzedakah lashon yachid. Then it says Oseh tzedakah kemo shomrei mishpat. Nearly, he says, it seems to me, ki bechol hamitzvot adich laasot b'knesiya berav am hadrat hamelech. In all other mitzvot, you want to be as public as possible. Sorry, give me one. Sorry. In all other mitzvot, you want to be as public as possible. Why? Because doing a mitzvah publicly is a kiddush Hashem. Berov am hadrat hamelech. with the majority of people witnessing you and knowing that you're doing this mitzvah, it glorifies the king. It glorifies the law. You see, other people are doing mitzvah. You might do the mitzvah too. Other people might do it. It's a beautiful thing. Masha einkin b'tzedakah, but that's different than tzedakah. Adiv sheyeh matan b'seter. You want to give tzedakah secretly. You want to give tzedakah privately. Nobody else should know. That's what it means. Hainu ashri shomrei mishpat. That's what it means. The guardians of justice. That should be done publicly. Aval b'tzedakah osa tzedakah b'chol eit. But tzedakah should be done at all times. And that should be by himself. She'atzmu zehu ha'osa b'chol eit. And that's why it should be done at all times. Kimi shechafetz b'yuro b'nei adam tov libo ein osa rak kisheroim. He shouldn't want anybody else to see him. Do people see you all the time? Maybe now, now that there's cameras everywhere, maybe now everybody sees you all the time. But it used to be nobody saw you in private. But you're supposed to do tzedakah all the time, even when nobody sees you. It's supposed to be a private matter. You're supposed to give in the office, as the old saying was. Says so. Let's bring it back to our verses. Zehu pirush mikra shel fanenu. That's the explanation of the verse in front of us. Et ha'ani imach, with the poor person with you. Why? Shelo acher b'nechem ele ha'ani ve'ata. The only people who should be there is the ani and you, the poor person and you. It's a private matter. That poor person getting tzedakah from you should not be advertised. Nobody should have to say, I gave tzedakah today to Ploni. Nobody should say that. It's a very private thing. That poor person needs to be with you privately, and nobody else should have to know about it. And that is the best way to give tzedakah. In fact, the ultimate way to give tzedakah, says the Rambam, is to give it in such a way that even the ani doesn't know that he got tzedakah from you. Completely anonymous. Ideally, even sorry?
No, sorry. Is that so? Like all these charity campaigns, like you should always put down anonymous for them?
No. I'll explain in a moment. But the ideal way of giving tzedakah is to give it to a poor person, and preferably to give it in a way that can not just give them money for the short term, but somehow maybe even gives them a job in the long term, right? Something that will sustain them long term, and to do it in such a way that they won't know that it came from you. In other words, the best way to give tzedakah to a poor person is to make sure they get a job without them knowing that you're the one who connected them with the job. That's the best way. Okay? Now, since we're on the topic, since you brought this up, and since God willing, soon our shul is going to have a charity campaign, right? It's in certain circumstances, it's important to know who gave that money, because you know that person perhaps didn't have very much, and they're giving to this cause. That means that this cause is important. Oh, this person gave. This person knows halakha, and this person knows what's an important charity and what's not an important charity. And this person, oh wow! So if it's a chashuv person, it's important to know who's giving. For example, it could be, right? I'll speaking maybe a little too personally here, but it could be, right, that that people can say, why should I support a community? Nobody's really involved. Nobody really cares enough. Nobody's really invested, right? And if everybody who gives donations is anonymous, so you don't know if anybody's invested. This anonymous donation could have come from, Pittsburgh, could have come from Nairobi. You don't know where the money came from. But if you know that there's people in the community supporting the community, then you know what? You know that somebody in the community cares about the community. There's a desire here for growth. Maybe not the fullest cooperation, et cetera, maybe not the greatest outturning, of volunteerism, but there's some There's people who care, who live here. Wow, we need to give them back. We need to give them back something. People are invested, so that's why one of the reasons why it's not always good to give anonymously. Why it's important to know who's the giver. Sometimes.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi.
Yes, I hear you.
So could it be like in the terms of giving to a person, there's their dignity involved. So if you're giving, you don't want to be singled out as a person. They shouldn't think to be indebted to any particular person for their sustenance.
Sure.
Where with an institution, you're supporting Torah learning, you're supporting survival of the shul, whatever it is. It's not a person, it's an institution. Then, like you said, to encourage others to give to that institution, you can advertise the fact that, you can't say who gave, for that matter. There's no one that's going to be feeling ashamed, perhaps, for having to be, given to.
Right. No, that's definitely true. Yeah. So an individual is also different than an organization. Of course, an organization that gets money from somebody should also not feel indebted to that person, obviously. But but you're right. Yes, that's definitely part of the reason as well. Correct. Good. All right. Now we're going to go. See, we have 15 minutes left and quite a bit more. Let's see how we're going to try. We're going to try to go a little faster, right? Maybe not. You have the source sheet, so you can go back to looking at the sources inside at your leisure. Right now, we'll just we even try this. We're going to skip actually the next one altogether. We'll get to it. Actually, the next one, I'll tell you what the question is. I'll tell you what the question is, and we won't get to the answer. Maybe we'll deal with it in Parshat Kitisa. Let me explain to you why. So Parshat Kitisa, all the way at the end of Devarim, has a similar verse to this verse. Here it says, "Lo tira et shor achicha o et seo nidachim v'italamta mehem hashev teshivim la'achicha." If you see the shore, the ox of your friend, of your fellow, your brother, right? His ox or his sheep, and they're lost, they've gone astray. Don't ignore them. Bring them back to this fellow. Okay. A parallel verse in Devarim. We know in Devarim there are a lot of parallel verses that are repetitious, seemingly, of other verses in the Torah. So there's a verse in 22:1 where there's the exact same verse almost, except the word achicha is different and some other differences. But achicha, which means friend or fellow, over there in Deuteronomy is oivecha, your enemy. So over there it's enemy, here it's friend. And so commentaries, including the Talmud, want to know what's the difference? Why is that different? So I think when we get to Parshat Kitisa, God willing, we'll get to an answer for that question. I'll try to make a note to deal with it then. All right, but let's skip to Shemot Chav Gimel Zion 23:7. Very, very beautiful piece here from Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, and this gives me another opportunity to remind people that I do plan on taking a break from the Jewish Life Cycles class at the end of February, I think it is, close to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky's yahrzeit, to give a class about him. He's a fascinating person that we just, I think a lot of people don't know enough about. So the famous verse is Midvar Sheker Tirchak. That's actually, we don't need the rest of you could read the rest of the verse if you want, but what we're going to focus on is these three words: Midvar Sheker Tirchak. Stay far away, Tirchak. Just keep a distance from Midvar Sheker, from a false thing, from any false word, from any falsity at all. Stay far, far away. All right. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, we have the text here. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky in Emet Yaakov his commentary on this verse is really about this this Gemara. So there's basically a story, and I'll just tell you the story. I'll tell you the story. I'll tell you the story. So there was a man who married a woman from a place called Kushta, I think it's called. Kushta. Yeah, so he married a woman from a place named Kushta. And in this place called Kushta, people did not lie. They did not say any false words at all. This whole area was famous for immaculate truthfulness. He never lied. And then this person obviously is not from the place. His wife was. So one day, his wife was sitting and washing her hair, and a neighbor came knocking on the door, and he thought, this man thought that it would be immodest to tell the neighbor that the wife can't come to the door right now because she's washing her hair. That shows, by the way, at least to those people who think that in the times of Chazal, that covering hair just meant braiding it or something like that. They were so serious about the tzniut of hair that even talking about it being exposed was a level of inappropriateness, right? Just like you talking about nakedness nowadays would be like inappropriate to talk about, right? So that's the level that they were on then for sure. So what did he say? He told the neighbor, she's actually not home right now, which is a lie. So he deviated from the truth, obviously. And because he did that, the Gemara says his 2 sons died. He lied. And by the way, it's a little white lie, and it was meant for a good reason and everything else. And under most circumstances, it would be fine. But because his wife is from this place that completely stood away from anything false, therefore, he was judged on this higher level. That's the way this Gemara is usually understood. And then the people of this town came to him and said, please do us a favor, move. You know, you're not good for this place. This place, we need people who don't lie at all. We can't have you're bringing death to us. We can't have that. So Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Emet Liakov, very well titled book, by the way, Emet Liakov, The Truth to Yaakov. So he says this story of Ayin Sham, and then he brings up the question that some of you might be already thinking. Why was he punished for this? You're allowed to lie for these kinds of reasons. You're allowed to give a little white lie. It's not considered a lie. So here you're going to get a little bit deep. I need you to try to focus here. Give me your heart for a moment. Nira, it seems, even though this is not really complete lie, Adam Harishon Kodem Hachet Lo Hayat Tzarech Malvushim. Adam Harishon, the first man, the first woman, before their sin, they did not need clothes. They didn't need tzniut. V'im kain ha deshamnim mishum shahaita chofefet rosha zeh rak la'achar hachet. The fact that we have to cover our hair nowadays, that's a consequence of that sin. V'nimtzan, we find shebe'etzem lo haynu tzrichem lishnot u'memela in emet hamiti. And we find that in fact, we don't need to. We wouldn't otherwise need to lie. We could just the truth is the truth. My hair is uncovered. Why are we lying? The fact is, though, covering hair in a sense is a kind of lie in itself. Shamati Marav Hirsch, I was going to bring you the Rav Hirsch. It's actually in last week's parsha, I believe. The Zechet Tzarech Livracha, Pirush, he explains Tevat Beged, the word for clothing in the Hebrew, Milashon Bagida, is from the same language as a lie. Clothing is a lie. Your non-organic self. It's artificial. Your clothing is an artificial representation of yourself. Your real self is, nude, right? There's a famous essay, "The Naked and the Nude," or a famous also poem by William Blake about this topic. Right? Really, clothing is artificial. Clothing is fake, but that fake is something that's necessary nowadays. That's the point. That's why he brought death onto the community, onto the people, because their falsity of covering hair, as she was obviously doing otherwise, and their wearing clothes and everything else, he sort of exposed that. He exposed them to the possibility that now they're open to death, which is what happened also to Adam HaRishon. The punishment for him not accepting the falseness of his mitzvah is the fact that he would eventually have to cover up his real self, and that became the truth. Now the truth is that you have to be covered. That's truth isn't what is organic always. Sometimes the artificial is the truth, is the way it's supposed to be. That's how it played out.
Well,
Okay,
didn't Adam like first lie?
Yes, exactly.
So why is Chava the one who covers her hair?
Are you saying men don't cover their hair? No, it's not a direct connect. In other words, both the man and the woman both lied. They both have to dress. They both have to wear clothing, not just cover hair. It's not. I'm not saying covering hair is the only punishment for the sin. Adam also sinned, and he's also punished. He has to work, for instance. He's not gonna have bread to eat except by the sweat of his brow. All right, so it's a longer topic about why exactly women cover their hair, but it's the beginning of the answer has to do with why we're clothed at all. And part of the reason we're clothed at all is because we're still continuing Adam's sin. We're still not as truthful as we could be. And so we're sort of covering up the truth of reality that should be inherent in things. Okay. That's a more complicated piece. You can look back into it at your leisure. We have a few more minutes, and I have two more comments I wanted to share with you. One from the Orach Chaim and one from the Beit HaLevi. We're going to do our best here. All right. So the Orach Chaim, I definitely want to share with you. Very important. Maybe we'll save the Beit HaLevi for next year. Vidal lo tekdar berivo. And this is a specific command to the poor person. The judge should not show any kind of favor. Right? A poor person and a rich person come to court. They're debating about a certain ownership topic. Somebody moved the fence. Their neighbors, whatever. I don't know what the exact situation is. Obviously, there are different situations where this can come into play. And the judge, I feel sorry for this poor person. He's wearing tatters. What does this rich person care if his fence is 1 inch over? It doesn't matter. He's plenty comfortable otherwise. He's got the Rolls Royce. He doesn't need that extra inch of land. You don't know, by the way, that extra inch of land might have gold. That extra inch of land might have oil. You don't know. That's part of the reason for this law. The law is you don't show favoritism to the poor person. You have to give the law according to the law. Who owns that particular property? Doesn't matter who's richer, who's poor. If the rich person wants to, he can say, you know what, I want to give it as a gift to this poor person. That's up to him. But you're not supposed to show favoritism. That's the law. But that's not the issue that the Orach Chaim is having with this verse. He has another problem. He says, Yirmuz b'tevat berivo. He has problem is with the word his quarrel. It's not the poor person's argument. It's not the poor person's case. It's two people's case. Two people are involved in this. Is that his dispute? Berivo. Vidal lo techdar beriv. Why berivo? What's that extra vav doing there? We started the parsha class today with an extra vav in the beginning. Now we've got an extra vav at the end. Berivo means in his fight, in his court case, but it's not his. It's a court case. So call it a court case. The verse would make 100% sense if it would have just said the Vidal lo techdar beriv. When he's in an argument, don't take his side just because he's poor. So what's his dispute? What's his argument? So he says, this is a hint to what it says in the Midrash, in Vayikra Rabbah 34:16. It says there, Ki ani osa miriva im kono. A poor person starts a fight with Hashem. V'lama zan lekol v'hu berav erom. He wonders, why is Hashem doing this? Hashem is taking care of everybody else. Why am I going hungry? Why am I naked? Why don't I have clothing? And anybody who gives tzedakah to a poor person and helps sustain him, that person is fighting the war of Hashem. He's defending Hashem's honor in front of the poor person. The poor person can't say, Hashem, you're sustaining everyone else. Now the poor person has to say, Hashem, thank you. You're sustaining me too. His argument isn't with the client, isn't with the other defendant or the other person in court. His argument is with Hashem. Why, Hashem? Why are you doing this to me? Why do I have to suffer? So that's the Midrash. Says the Or HaChaim, that could be applied here. In a time when people don't take pity on the poor, Tanat ani hi tana minishmat v'hudayeret. This poor person's now going to have a stronger claim against Hashem. He has a legitimate concern. He's not taken care of. Everybody else is taken care of. That's what Hashem is saying, that you shouldn't give honor to the poor person's argument. Meaning, you should show the poor person the same kind of compassion and the same kind of support that you would show anybody else. You have to take care of this person and make sure that his argument is not exacerbated. This is a very important lesson for all of us, whether we know a poor person or not, because very often, the number one reason, as we've said in other contexts, the number one reason why people go off the derech is because things are not right in this world. And when things are not right in this world, that strengthens the argument of people who want to go away, people who want to not listen to Hashem. Why should I listen to Hashem? There's no God in this world. I had trauma. I was attacked. I am poor. I am this. I am that. Nobody's helping me. Where's the community? When there is a community, when the community is strong, when the community has the support that it needs to support others, what do you have? You have a way to fight against that. So what do you mean nobody's supporting you? We're supporting you. Hashem's law has told us to support you. You're arguing against Hashem that nobody loves you? We love you. Hashem told us to love you. Hashem's law is what's sustaining you. So you can't have an argument against Hashem. Your argument has no basis, in fact, and either you want to just leave because you're too lazy or you're whatever, or you come back. Hashem wants you back. That's one of the strongest arguments you can make to bring people back to Hashem. And that's one of the very important mitzvot that we have today is Kiruv Rechokim, and God willing, we'll all be successful in bringing ourselves and others back to Derech Hashem. I'm going to, I want to also thank, I do not thank enough, we have an anonymous, speaking of anonymous donations, We have an anonymous sponsor for this class, as many of our classes, and I want to thank this extremely touching congregant who is constantly supporting us, and I want to say thank you privately and publicly. And I want to wish all of you a good night. I'm going to stop the recording